Hi everybody, it's Tuesday at Witches of the Moon, and let me apologize first because this video is so late. Any opportunity I had this weekend to record a video got taken, and today was a really long day. This week's topic is Hollywood witches, and I thought that maybe I would do, when I first saw the topic, maybe my top 10 witches and my least favorite witches. But then I decided that I didn't want to do that, and I really just kind of wanted to talk on what my take was. If you hear barking, that's my dogs. Somebody was walking down the street and was talking on their phone, so now they think the whole world's coming to get them. Anyway, when I was younger, I'm 33, when I was younger, what I knew of witches were The Wizard of Oz and the Disney movies, and I remember there being one version of Hansel and Gretel with Cloris Leachman. Those were the movies that I thought of when I thought of witches, and The Witches, the one with Angelica Houston. And you know, in all of those movies you had a lot of stereotype when it came to witches. You were either really ugly and evil, or you were really beautiful and good. You know, that's what you had. That's what Hollywood had at the time. At that time, it wasn't something that people really talked about still. So all you had were these filmmakers who wanted to just make something entertaining, and the best way to do that is to exaggerate the truth one way or the other. So despite the fact that I was still enamored with witches, you didn't really have a true depiction of a witch. You just had the fairy tale, so to speak. What I think is interesting is the more liberal we became, you know, I guess as a nation, the more truth was able to be depicted in Hollywood. I think that's what was so good about The Craft, because when The Craft came out and then Practical Magic came out, you didn't just have, you know, Hollywood witches and the extreme stereotype. You had movies that were based on true facts when it came to any type of witchcraft or any type of occult type things. You know, back in the 80s, even if they used things that weren't witches, but they were any kind of occult thing, like a Ouija board. You had the movie Witchboard, which was, you know, about someone playing a Ouija board by herself and getting possessed. You had these very extreme depictions of what these things were. And I'm not saying that these things can't happen if you're not careful with what you do, but not to these extremities. And you know, plus everything in the 80s was cheese. I mean, any kind of horror movie that came out in the 80s was going to be extremely cheesy and wonderful, but still. But anyway, when The Craft came out, and I think that's why a lot of us probably even, you know, gravitate towards that movie, is because that was, to me, from as far as I can remember, the first real depiction of witchcraft. And at that time, when that came out, I think I was probably about 16, which is when I was really starting to question my beliefs. That gave me something solid to hold on to. Like, that is something that seems real to me. That is something that witches aren't flying on brooms. You know, you're not conjuring things out of your fingers and blowing people up. You're not, you know, these are things that seem like they are real. And it was with that I started to kind of question, you know, things a little bit more and wonder if that was the path, because I'd always been drawn to witches. But when that came out, it was like a pretty eye-opening experience. It felt like that was right. And then Practical Magic came out, and they did a lot of the same thing. I mean, of course, you've got a little bit more hocus pocus there, but it still was a little bit more real than the movies that we grew up with. It's still kind of teetering on involving a little bit more truth. And I think, you know, a lot of people think that Hollywood and politics go hand in hand, that what is happening in the world is what gets depicted in the Hollywood scene and in movies, and that's I think in a lot of cases that's true. Um, you know, life imitates art a lot of the times, and when people began to get a little bit more open when it came to other religions, I think movies like The Craft and Practical Magic and even Charmed, which even though it does have a lot of entertainment value and a lot of exaggerations, a lot of that stuff, you can dig through in Charmed, and there's some truth in it. The herbs they grab, some of the rules they follow. I mean, they researched some of their stuff and just kind of exaggerated on the truth where that was concerned. And then even on up until now, you've got Salem, which of course it's exaggerated, but that's getting a little bit more into the nitty gritty of witchcraft, and it seems more real. And I think the more progressive we become and liberal, this nation becomes, the more real we're going to be able to see. The hocus pocus part of it's going to be gone. They're trying to make witchcraft a little bit more real in Hollywood. Your witches aren't so exaggerated anymore. They're not, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is another one. You don't have a talking cat. You don't have somebody who can wiggle her finger and change. I mean, even back when Bewitched was on, it was still very lighthearted. She was a beautiful witch, and she just had to wiggle her nose and things appeared and moved, and they made it very, my dogs are still going off. That is ridiculous. I don't even know if you can hear that, but it's driving me nuts. I even lost my train of thought, but on Bewitched, you still had a very exaggerated way of telling the story of a good witch, and then her mother, wasn't as attractive as she was, and she was one that was more mischievous. So I think now you're getting to where they don't stick to those stereotypes anymore. You can have someone who is a bad witch, so to speak, and she's very beautiful, and they're bringing a little bit more realism to it and doing the practice justice, I think, in a lot of ways. I remember watching when I got the DVD for The Craft, I like to watch all the behind the scenes things, and they were talking that Fairuza, I think that's how you say her name, the one that played Nancy, is Wiccan, and she also brought in a high priestess to kind of help with the authenticity of what they were doing in the movie. So that's why it felt so real. There were people who honestly practiced making this film. And I think they're paying a lot more attention to detail now. We've got a lot of good things coming out of Hollywood where we're concerned, and people are a little bit more open about things. American Horror Story did an entire season of witches, and of course that one was a little bit more playful, but they had some very real things in there tied in, and I just think it's really good to see that we're not so exaggerated anymore. We're not one extreme or the other. We're not ugly, if we practice anything dark. It's just really nice to see. Some of my favorite TV shows were some of those little cheesy things back in, the 80s. And I used to say I've been watching Nick at Night all the time and watched Bewitched. But I think just to close this out, I will give maybe my three favorite witches, and or maybe I'll just do my witch movies, because I can't really, or witch things, whether it be TV shows or whatever, but because I can't narrow it down. I like so many, I can't narrow it down to three off the top of my head like that. But I'm going to go with, and it's probably cliched in of itself, but The Craft, Practical Magic, and Charmed. All for very different reasons, very different stages in my life. The Craft was very eye-opening for me. Practical Magic was to me, Practical Magic has a very peaceful feeling about it. And I watch that movie when I need to feel that. And as for Charmed was what got me through my grandmother's illness. She was sick, and they had put her on hospice, and we were constantly at her house, Charmed was what I watched to get me through those really hard days. And so that's always going to hold a special place. These three particular movies or television shows hold a special place with me and in my life. So I'm definitely going to say those three. That is my opinion on Hollywood Witches and how far we've come. And I'd like to hear your opinions. You know, I'd like to hear what your favorite witches are, what your favorite witch shows, books, movies, whatever. So let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next week. Blessed be.